episode number 1 of Fleeting Thoughts, an Altered TCG podcast, part of the Main Deck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan, and as Dan said, welcome to Fleeting Thoughts. Today our topic is going to be kind of going over our preliminary thoughts on the print and play and our experiences demoing to a few people, and just kind of our extended thoughts on the revealed card pool due to the print and play being released.
Yes, I'm very excited for this, Jordan, because it has been actually a little while. What has it been? 4 months since we got to actually try this game, and we haven't been able to play it more since we first saw it at Gen Con.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember after we left Gen Con too, there was a small stint where me and you were trying to remember what all the cards did in the deck so we could just like make paper one. It didn't work out.
No, yeah, but, that's right. We were both like, what do you remember? Let's try and make cards so we can like show people the game.
Yeah. But now we got them in full and it's been great. It's very exciting. I'm pumped to finally have my hands on at least some of the game, and I'm very excited for the game as a whole.
Yes, I've gotten to demo with, I think my count is around like a dozen people or so far. I've been able to run through the game with them, show people the game, had a wonderful reaction to everything. But of course, before we dive into our conversation today, I just have a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, if you do enjoy listening to this today, I really hope you do. And if so, go ahead and leave a like or a comment or both on our YouTube video if you're watching that way, or if you're listening to us through your podcatcher of choice. If they have a way to like review the podcast and you can leave a positive rating, that would also be super helpful as we start to grow and get our kind of our outreach going and find more interested in Altered TCG. And then secondly, if you want to support Main Deck in general, one of the best ways you can do that is by using our TCG Player affiliate link when you're shopping for TCG singles or sealed product. The link for that is going to be down in the description or in the show notes if you're listening again to the audio version. Or you can always just go to bit.ly/shoptcgs. That's bit.ly/shoptcgs. It'll bring you right to the TCG Player homepage, and from there you can shop just like normal. It'll cost you nothing extra at all, but instead we get a little bit of a kickback from TCG Player, which actually really helps us a ton. So thank you so much to everyone who's been supporting us that way. And if you want to support us that way as well, we would greatly appreciate that. Now, Jordan, let's talk about our experience now that we have finally gotten some printed cards, but not like the kind that we're gonna print from Altered later, the kind where we printed them and cut them out and put them in front of like old Magic cards or something. Jordan, what's your experience been like getting to play the game now?
It's been exciting. I've had a fantastic time. I haven't got to demo as much as you have, but I have some friends lined up. Once we get our schedules like kind of lined up, I'll have a few more people that I'm going to be teaching and running some games with. So I haven't got to play all of the decks yet, but I did get to play a few of the ones I didn't get to play in Gen Con, and I got to look over the card pool thus far that have been reviewed. Of course, it's print and play. They might even change the cards in there to something different, but at least we have a better idea of what each faction is kind of going towards, or even just effects in general and how they're going to function, which has been very exciting. And kind of in my mind, I'll have like, oh, they could do this. Oh, they could have things that do this. So I'm very excited about it overall.
Yeah, it's been super fun. One thing that we really kind of lamented, I think we talked about this before, from Gen Con, was that we only got to try out a couple of decks each. So when we left Gen Con, and I think you've mentioned this even on a previous podcast before too, we were they had to like force us out because we sat there and we begged them to play another game just so we could get like one more game under our belts and tried some different factions. And we were heading out the door when like everyone else from the next session was like already in, just like waiting for us to move. We're like, no, wait, we just got to finish this game.
Yeah, the like preamble to the next session, we're there like looking over the art books and stuff and like having snacks, waiting for people to pile in, and me and Dan are just like, oh, we gotta finish this game. We gotta know. It was just so encapsulating. Partially because we just weren't expecting it either. Like the first game, as they're telling the rules, we're like, okay, this seems kind of neat. We played it and it was just like, oh, this is good. But the second game, we are already like, we are in the mindset of like, we're in. We need to know now. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, one thing too was that the other reason we really wanted to play so much was that, there were 6 factions. They had decks for all 6 factions there. And ultimately, a couple of the factions remained totally mysterious to you and I after we left.
Hmm.
We didn't get to see anything from Muna, the green faction, or
Or
from
Axiom.
Axiom, the
Yeah.
brown faction. I had played Ortis in the second game. The first game I played Lyra, and then you had played Izmir the first game, and then
Yep.
Bravos.
Bravos. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Fire cat.
Um, yeah, yeah, get to make your cat every turn. Um, and that yeah, I mean, like, it was I had no idea kind of what was really in those factions. Like, I had a basic idea. I was like, okay, I think I knew that Axiom was the one faction of those demo decks that like actually played with permanent cards, and Muna had something about green stuff, druids and stuff.
Yeah, I was like, the
Um,
druid lady's petting a large red fox.
yes,
Seems naturey.
had cute animals, I'm sure. So now that we've gotten to actually play with them, I remember from my first games, I thought Lyra was fun, and I thought Ortis was really cool. I've gotten to play all the decks now, and I've actually become enamored with Muna. I think Muna is one of the most fun factions to play, um, and to me, it's actually a I think kind of a skill testing faction. It's a little bit harder to play because it's all about building up your guys and kind of keeping them in play. So it's really easily disrupted. The opponent can easily kind of like, okay, well, you stacked a bunch of stuff on that guy. I'm going to bounce it to your hand. I'm going to banish it, something. And then you go, well, that sucks. um, but when you can play around the removal correctly and bait out the right things and everything, it's an extremely rewarding faction to play. And nothing feels as good as like having like a gigantic cone man out that you've stacked multiple boost counters on. That's like, yep, for the next 2 turns, I win this side, and then I'm gonna play him again. I love that so much. What factions have you found yourself really liking?
Well, the only ones I've got to play since Gen Con are the top two I wanted to play anyway. Like I said, I've looked over all the cards. I do find it fascinating for Muna specifically. They have not quite ramp, but what I'd like to consider like halfway or like mini ramp with the gift, because there's a lot of stuff that give gift. Makes everyone in the table draw a card. So not really getting you resources, but it gives you more options in hand, so you're more likely to put cards down, which I think is cool because it's not ramp outright, but it just gives you that little extra flexibility,
Yeah,
especially in the later game.
and I just want to jump in just because, I know I'm cognizant to the fact that we might have people listening to this podcast who aren't like ingrained TCG players. And so when we're talking about the term ramp, it's probably important to kind of mention what that means. So ramp is typically getting your resources out faster than the opponent does. And I think we talked about this just a little bit before, Jordan, and because I think you have an interesting take on this. I never would have thought of what you're saying that way, exactly, because typically just drawing cards is not a method of ramp. And I still think there are going to be people who are going to argue with you because they're just like say, nope, that's absolutely not ramp. That's fine. But one thing that we've noticed, I think, in playing a lot of these games is that it does depend a little bit on the game, depends a little bit on the opponent, but it's actually fairly easy to run out of or get very low in cards in hand to the point where you actually do consider not dropping a resource,
Hmm.
um, which may be wrong most of the time. I'm not 100% sure, like, as far as like from a competitive standpoint. Inside me, the competitive TCG player says you should be dropping those resources until you're 100% sure that you no longer need them for the rest of the game. Otherwise, you're denying yourself not just a resource that turn, but like being down
Every
a
turn
resource,
thereafter. Yeah.
yeah, every turn thereafter, right? But sometimes, and this I think this can come up because the game uses this mechanic where you're going to be playing sometimes multiple cards because you have two different sides you're trying to compete for every turn, and then they're going to go to memory. Sorry, it used to be called memory. You're gonna go to reserve. I'm still getting used to that. You're gonna go to
I
reserve.
forgot they changed it. I was
Yeah.
thought I was like, man, I swear that didn't call it reserve. Like
Nope.
I'm pretty sure it was something else, and I was like, maybe it was memory, but no. Okay, so it was memory, and they changed it. Okay,
Correct. Yeah. So they're
I
gonna
did
go to
not know that part.
reserve. Yep. They're gonna go to reserve, and then you can play them from them one more time. So the cards in your reserve are kind of like more cards in your hand, except you can't play them as resources. Um, Now, depending on the opponent, some opponents are going to play the sabotage mechanic, maybe more than others. That is a spicy, spicy mechanic because it's going to remove a card from your reserve, thereby denying you the option of playing that card a second time. Um, and we've had games now where players have gotten fairly low on card count to the point where I've watched players I've demo with, they have like two cards in hand and they're just I can almost read their mind. They're like, I can't put either of these down as a resource. I can't. They're too good. They're too critical to my game plan. I need to have these for, even if I can't play this one this turn, I need to have it for a future turn. Having the cards in reserve, usually gives you some options. So you can be like, well, you know what, I can drop this because then I can just play these this turn. But if you're out of those and you only have two cards in hand, I can see when you go, these cards are more important than getting this resource this turn. Um,
Yeah.
so I get what you're saying is ultimately what I like, a very long-winded way of saying that, I get what you're saying, and that having more cards in hand is giving you that ability to more freely put cards down. You don't miss your mana drops as often, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I agree. That is a very cool mechanic.
Yeah, and but the faction that I have been kind of jamming has been Axiom. It was one of the ones I wanted to try when we were there. Being an engineer myself, I was like, oh, I gotta try the engineers, and I get why they picked it. I was a little bit sad that it's brown because it's not the most exciting color, but I understand it's probably more so for like visually impaired. I know color blindness. That's probably why they chose the color palette that they did, because otherwise some of the colors would probably muddle together and it'd be hard to tell. But the robots and the design of the bots on the cards, beautiful. I love all the little robots, and I like being able to put stuff on the board because in that like later game or even mid game, at any point in the game, but more importantly later, when you're at that more point where you're like, I don't have the cards to do a bunch of stuff every turn because you're battling it out. Being able to just put something freely on the board is so good in my opinion, and it works so great because the way the game has its push and pull, where you can threaten all three spaces, whether it's going to push your game plan or not. It's something the opponent has to consider. Like, do they just concede to the 1 point on water and they're like, I don't want to waste resources just to fight this one water, but he's going to win on water if I don't do something. So it's like that little like nagging sound in the back of your head where like, I got to deal with this. But, or like in other games where you're like, I had like it's a weak creature that just does something good when they hit. So you're like, I gotta throw resources away to kill this one damage, really? And it just kind of
Yeah.
builds up.
Yep. I just want, before I jump, I want to respond to that. Before I jump into that, I want to say I also think a reason that Axiom is brown might actually go back. We know that the I don't want to butcher his name because it's in French, um, but the person whose idea it was to even found Equinox and create Altered. Um, we would pronounce it in English as Regis. I think it's pronounced differently in French. So I guess that's I guess where I'm going to leave that, unfortunately, because I haven't had time to practice saying his name correctly, and I don't want to make him feel bad. Uh, but I know we know that it was said that he wanted to bring back that feeling of old school Magic. That's why they're doing the unique cards and everything. And if you know anything about old school Magic, it's that all of the artifacts were brown back then.
Yeah, I
And so I'm
forgot about
sure,
that part.
yeah, I'm sure a
That's
little part of that was just that, you know what, this is the classic artifact artifice sort of faction color from classic Magic. So I think,
that makes
yeah, I mean,
sense.
I see where you're coming. Like, I don't usually pick up brown sleeves. I don't, when I'm picking card sleeves, I don't usually like it that much, but I don't know. It kind of feels like it works for the color palette that they used for the art on all the cards too. I think they look decent.
Yeah, for sure. The cards themselves. Oh, the cards on everything now. Oh man,
Yeah,
one of the
one,
best features about the game is the
oh,
card art, and the UI design looks very clean and readable. I love it.
I want to say no. I'll say that for later. I'm going to respond to the Axiom thing. um, you pointed out something that has been just super exciting to explore in Altered specifically, and it it is because of the mechanics of Altered, that makes this mechanic so interesting and different than every other TCG we're playing, including Star Wars Unlimited, which may have a similar sort of board structure but
Framework.
plays totally differently. Um, Having anything like the Ortis faction or Axiom things, Axiom permanents that put anything that just puts a little like 1/1/1 guy on the board on one of those sides. That is so fun. It sounds like it shouldn't be fun, but it's extremely fun because you put that 1/1/1 unit out there, and you're gonna win unless the opponent commits to that side. And there are so many little like mind games you can play by doing that, because you can, especially if any effect gives you the option of which side to put it on there. I think there are a couple of those so far where you not all, like the Ortis one has to go in hero, the Bravos one has to go in companion. But I think one of the axioms lets you choose. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head right now. But if you ever have the ability to choose, you can go wherever you want. You don't want to actually win that turn, right? And then your opponent will go, well, I mean, I just have to, I don't care. Maybe your opponent doesn't care which one they went on. They're like, I just have to progress. So I'm going to go here and fight him on this one or something, so that I can at least deny him that. And then the ball's in your court. In Altered, one of the strongest things we found is the ball being in your court, responding to the opponent's actions, which is why Izmir has the whole like, uh,
Yeah.
after you mechanic, right?
Yeah,
Where you
such a
let the
good
opponent,
mechanic. Like, well, to touch on that, that was the deck that I was playing at Gen Con. And when we first sat down, both me and Dan looked at this character, and they have no abilities but one called After You. And at first glance, we're like, this is a terrible character. Like,
why
why?
would I
No
want
one's
to
gonna
go
play
second?
this. Yeah, it's like, why would I ever want to go second? And then I used it the first time, and my brain was immediately like, oh, I always want to go second.
Yes,
This
please.
ability is potentially too powerful, and I love it.
Yeah, it's like you put that down and you watch your opponent respond, and then you have all the information in the world and you go, perfect. Okay, now that you're fighting me somewhere I don't care about, I'm going to put this giant thing over here, or I'm going to put this like small thing over here and make you make a really difficult decision now about like should I half fight him over here? You can hold back, some of your stronger plays. There's a whole sequencing thing. Sequencing is super super important too, to try and like get your opponent to maneuver in the wrong direction if possible. Love all that stuff. That is what's super super fun, to me. And yeah, I like Axiom. I found really really fulfilling. I found it a really really fun faction to play because you're getting to really mess with that permanent mechanic, um,
Hmm.
that the other factions currently, are in this print and play, aren't really touching. There's a couple other factions have a couple of permanents in them. Lyra does, Ortis does, but the really cool thing about how this mechanic works, and the reason that I was really, really vibing with it, was every character can only have up to a certain number of permanents in play. Right now, it's all two. That's a check at the end of the turn.
Yeah, at the end of the day. So
At
like
the
you
end of
can
the
still
day.
still load stuff, get all your hives to pop off, and then just get rid of all but two, and you're like, got a bunch of two twos run or two twos just plaguing the field on every lane. It's
And
great.
yeah, I thought it was really fun to like build a contraption that turn, like making some things. And when because you want to play a permanent every turn with that current print and play leader, because that's how you get Brass Bug into play. Um,
Hmm.
So at first I read that, I was like, oh no, I can only have two. But I was like, no, no, it's really cool actually, because I can put this one into play, and then I can choose, there are a couple of permanents that just do something when you play them and then don't do anything. So that you're free to just kind of like pitch those later, but they trigger your hero still. Um, and you can build this big contraption that turn and then just discard down to the ones you want to keep. And it just felt like my wheelhouse a little bit too. I really was enjoying that. Just kind of like building up, building back down, going in and out of kind of having bigger machines running. Um,
And thematically, I like it because of the way, kind of like you're describing, like the gameplay of it feels like you're building like a functioning like factory or like a machine with a
yeah.
bunch of small gears that make themselves kind of go the more you add to them, and it feels it's so fun to play. And like I said, I love the way the bots look. It's fantastic.
One
And
thing
Brass
that
Bug
I
Hive, so good. I love it.
Brass Bug Hive is super cool. The thing that I really liked about it was, I think a lot of games will take a faction like this and it very quickly turn it into like the sit back and let your cards like do things faction. But the way that hero works made it very active the whole time. You wanted to keep playing more permanents than pitching down to them. Um, and that also made it so like when you have a deck in a TCG where it's just kind of like I put out my things and then I sit back and I just win the game. Those decks are typically pretty cold to disruption. Whereas I think, meaning sorry, that you're gonna like lose the game pretty easily if they just kill like the key component of your
Your combo piece or whatever.
Rube Goldberg device kind of
Oh yeah,
setup.
that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. Once they kill that kind of, they get rid of the part that drops the marble, and then nothing works anymore. In this case, it felt like since the deck was built so that you just played permanents every single turn to the point where you were going to start discarding your own anyway. When someone answers your permanent, it doesn't feel quite as devastating. It's like, oh man, like I really wanted that one. Oh well, here's another one. you know, and so I enjoyed that quite a bit. Um, Bravos. Now you played Bravos at Gen Con.
Yes.
Bravos, I thought right away this was the most boring faction. That's what
I was
that
actually
was
gonna say I kind of get what you're saying.
I thought that. Now I want to back up. I thought that initially, right?
Yeah, after my experience at Gen Con, yeah, let me be clear as well. After Gen Con, I was like, these guys are just kind of lame and basic. But then after I looked at some of the cards that I didn't see in our original play, I was like, oh, this could be sick.
I got excited. I played it. I think it was maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. I got to sit down with someone else, teach them how to play, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to play Bravos. I'm going to give this one more shot. I'm going to try it out, and had an exceptionally fun game where I was able to put out what is it, Atlas or something? There's the gigantic dude. He comes in. He's a 5 drop that is 3/3/3 stats, but he has a keyword that makes him count as if he's in
Yep,
both sides of the expedition.
gigantic. I
Yep.
love that keyword.
And I kind of maneuvered in the game so I could get a turn later on. So where I was like gigantic guy and then training session him and put like a bunch of boost counters on him. It's like, okay, now you have to deal with like a 7/7/7 on both sides. um, and when the game got so tight, it was like down to the wire. We were both just like a one step away from winning. And if I recall, that was able to really put my opponent in a tough spot the turn before the game ended, to the point where they had to kind of use some resources suboptimally to try and prevent me from just winning the game outright that turn, which then let me get like a killer Hua Mulan out next turn from reserve. So she was like super buffed up. It was the rare one. So she was like super buffed up. Um, and I think I won that game, if I remember, by a single point, of a single stat point on the on the expedition track that we were both fighting for, to secure the victory. It was really close, but I enjoyed the power of really big stuff that game.
Yeah, Bravos is one of those that, like I said, at face value looks kind of bland, but when you get some of the other pieces to it, it clicks into place, and you're like, oh, there's some random, just like sick stuff that I can do to really push my advantage.
The thing that's really cool is that I really enjoyed in that faction and in Muna also. Those were the ones where I definitely was like doing this the most because they have some pretty cheap costing um, event cards. Uh, and it was that they're the cards that don't have fleeting, so you'll play them and get the effect, and then they'll go to reserve, and then you can, if you have the resources, you can play them a second time. So doing things like training session, well, you know what, I'll training session again, like that. That's how you get it late game with Bravo, some like really really massive stuff. I really, yeah, I love that. I love the reserve mechanic so much. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, the reserve is pretty sick. Um, I'm definitely excited to see the full rulebook too, because I'm wondering if they'll tweak anything like mechanically. I'm assuming not, because like they have such a like cracked like testing team. They've probably already caught all the like random things with that. But
Yeah, I think the game is like fairly tested at this point. I'm sure it's just like minor kind of tweaks to numbers. I mean, I know they were settling on wording and everything before they released the print and play. So I think the wording and everything is pretty locked in. The last things we're kind of waiting on are like, I mean, obviously, like I said, little developmental tweaks on numbers just to try and keep everything fair. and a decision on how many rares and uniques go in a constructed deck. I think that's the other. I think the
Mm.
last we've heard, they're honing in on 15 rares, and it might still be 3 uniques. And
And
then the
it's
rest of
40
your deck.
card deck for
Yep.
final count. Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
which leaves you still with 22 common cards, meaning over half your deck is common, which another thing that we I think are very excited about in Altered is your decks realistically shouldn't be that expensive. Because guaranteed over half of your deck has to be commons. It's like there's a kind of a ceiling. It can't really get like that out of control. Um, so yeah, I think we're just waiting on that stuff. But otherwise, I think things are fairly locked in, and I think that shows because it's been the game has been for me. I don't know about how your experience has been exactly, Jordan, but for me, this game has been demoing like none other that I've been able to demo with people. Every person I've shown this game to, I've even shown it to people. I've had people come to our demo event who are like, I do not want to like this game. I literally sit down
They
and say
come
like,
in ready to hate.
yeah. They're like, I want to walk away thinking this was not a good experience, or at least this was like a mediocre game that I don't want to invest in. And they go, actually, that was pretty good. I really liked that, and I'm probably gonna back the Kickstarter now. How's your experience been with that?
It's been pretty good. So far, the people that I've showed it to or I've preliminary showed it to are I haven't had anyone who's like ready to hate it, but all of them seemed they went from being like, oh, that might be kind of cool, and then when I dove deeper, they're like, I could see myself liking this game. I've even had a guy who isn't really even a card game player who seems interested. I'm pretty sure, based on how I know him, he's more interested in the non-game side of it because I told him about the other stuff like the different revolutionary stuff the game's going to be doing with like distribution and how your collection's handled, and he's really excited to see how that unfolds. But he was even like, the game even sounds sick. I think I might try to play it too. He's like, so he wants to come over at some point to my house and like actually like play a real full game, which is interesting because like I said, normally he's not too big. He likes board games, but he's not a TCG player. But this might be the TCG that captures his heart,
That's something
locks
that
him in.
I think that's actually going to be a more common thing for Altered than other TCGs, many other TCGs on the market. We obviously saw a good amount of that happen when Lorcana released, and that was like that was due in part to two reasons. One, the IP was just
The
appealing to
power of
people.
Disney.
Disney, yep, power of Disney. But number two, it was Ravensburger pushing it. And if you're in the tabletop space, Ravensburger is a household name, or Ravensburger.
Mhm.
I think I say it wrong every time. Ravensburger is actually, I believe, how you're supposed to pronounce that. Um,
Really?
yeah, it's German. So,
Oh, I thought it would have been ravens because their symbol is like a raven in a little box or whatever.
but Germans don't say that word as raven. I believe
I
they say. I
guess.
believe. Look, maybe there's going to be a German person in the comment being like, "This was the worst podcast I've ever listened to in my life because you guys have no idea how German works." But I'm fairly certain I've heard people saying Ravensburger, um,
Okay.
who I would trust with the pronunciation of it.
Fair,
Um,
fair.
anyway, Altered has a similar sort of impact. Actually, interestingly, I've seen a lot of people commenting on like the Facebook ads that Equinox has been pushing out, weirdly comparing the game very directly to Lorcana, like what sometimes in weird ways. Like that, I one person I saw posted a picture of it was like the Tinkerbell enchanted or something enchanted card from Lorcana, and or no, it was the Hercules one. It was the Hercules enchanted card from set 2 in Lorcana, and they posted it and they said right after they posted something that said like, does this look familiar, or like basically insinuating that they copied from Lorcana in some way. And I'm like, I don't know if you guys have seen a Lorcana card, but it doesn't look anything like an altered card, in my opinion, I guess. Um, so
Maybe they
I
just got
guess,
confused because there's questing in Lorcana and you're adventuring in this game.
yeah, those two are almost synonymous words, but
Both
not.
IPs are based off of different cultures, like fairy tales, if you will.
Like I've been telling people, Altered is my favorite TCG that features Mulan and Tinkerbell. So it's, there is some similarity there, but not Hercules so far, at least that we've seen. So I just like I was having trouble like understanding kind of where that was coming from. But the point is that people are, and that wasn't the only. I've seen other comments too, but there are people who are comparing. Maybe it's that like sort of bright cartoonish, like Western cartoonish style that Altered has. Um, that is like people just feel like that kind of friendly, that non-violent sort of art style is like getting people to like get the same vibe. I just wouldn't have said that it looks like a stolen card template or anything because it's the same thing. It's not the same
Yeah.
thing at all.
The only other thing I could think of is maybe they do forget that, like, the works of Disney are based off of, like, classic, I don't wanna say classic literature, but, like, classic tales from different places, and some of the themes of these ones are based off of those same tales, so, like,
Mhm.
it's not based off of Disney, but they're both pulling inspiration from the same story, if you will. So maybe that's why they're like, "Oh, it's Disney," because maybe they're just either aren't aware or forgot that most Disney stories are pulled from not Disney.
Yeah. No, that could be. That could totally be what's going on. Either way, it's definitely a different game than Lorcana. But I think that's going to appeal to people in the same way, in that it's a very inviting theme. It's not like you don't have to be like a huge anime fan to be into it like some of the other games that we cover. Um, I think it can just appeal to a wide range of people in general. And then when people understand the pedigree behind the game, again, the creator of the game was the founder of Libellude, which is the company that produced Dixit, Mysterium, Seasons, Dice Forge, some very, very popular, especially Dixit Mysterium, very, very popular board
Basically,
games.
just produced bangers from the board
Yeah,
game space
the
constantly.
straight up, that list is all bangers. Like it
Yeah.
is. They're great, great games. And just like with Ravensburger and Lorcana, that seems to be something that appeals to people who are typically tabletop players, um, but maybe, may not dabble in a TCG unless this board game publisher that they kind of, that gives it some sort of, some sort of weight to them is the one
Mhm.
publishing it. Um, and I think that, I think that's actually going to be really big because with this unique system of buying and selling cards, uh, I think I'd like to say that the people who actually look into it and understand the system when like the Kickstarter launches and aren't normally TCG fans might actually find that they're more interested in this game because of that. I think it's going to be an affordable game to play. And I think it's going to be very easy to acquire exactly the cards that you want, which from a board game playing perspective, like someone who's a hardcore tabletop gamer, often that like collectible, randomized, like expensive cards model is a turnoff
Mhm.
for them. But this model might have some advantages that I think will maybe make them think a second time about it.
Yeah, plus the ability to just print whatever you need, and it'll make the barrier of entry, because getting friends to play new card games, I know this from a fact, is like pulling teeth for some people. Some people are like, "This is my one. I play Magic, and I don't want to hear, see, or listen to anything about any other card game." But if you're like, literally, it's just your time. Even if you like the game and want to play with us at our table, costs you nothing. I can print any deck you want. The only way you need to really truly like buy product is once you're in enough to be like, I want to come to the casual tournament at the card shop. I don't want to just play at your house. I want to go play at the card shop. I want to get cool prizes. I want to get foil cards. Like, then they'll be like, okay, I'm in, which makes it so much easier to like have people approach, or even the people you wouldn't expect, which is another boon for the game, because its audience is going to be able to capture that wide net. It's just getting people to try it, and there might be like family members that you'll be like, hey, they normally wouldn't want to do that, they don't care, but you're like, I can get you this, you can try it at my house right now. basically for free. Or if you have children and you want them to learn and you're unsure if they're like going to be able to handle a more complex game, it's literally no skin off your back. If you're already playing, you're just like, print them a deck. If they end up not liking it or it's too much for them, you just, it's, you didn't lose any money, you didn't buy them a bunch of cards, you just, they get to have fun, and then you get to have fun, and everyone has fun, and it's excellent. It's just, the barrier to entry is so low with this game. I feel like that's going to be a huge boon to people catching on, because it's going to have that, not word of mouth, but like, oh, my friend tried this, he wants me to try it. All I have to do is show up and play, and then have a great time.
That kids thing you mentioned is actually kind of I hadn't really thought specifically about that. One thing that I think is an issue sometimes is like, let's say you have a child and you want them to play Lorcana with you. Maybe they might even want to because they love Disney, they love Elsa or whatever. Lorcana cards are not cheap because of how popular that the game is. So you might be tempted to give them your really cool Amber deck that has your expensive Rapunzels in it. I think she's actually gone down a lot in price, but like you're maybe like have an Amber Steel deck with Rapunzel and Tinkerbell, some cards that cost a penny or two. But you definitely don't want to give it to your like 6-year old and be like, "Hey, it's all yours," because it's gonna get destroyed. It's gonna get wrecked. It's gonna get washed. It's gonna be a Charizard in the pocket that goes in the washing machine and gets destroyed.
They'll be eating
Um,
their French toast sticks and then get syrup all over the cards.
right, right. So it's really cool to have a game where you can just say, you know what, Sarah, this is your deck. Like, this is yours. You can do whatever you want with it. And if it gets destroyed, you just can, it's you pay a small fee, but you just print it again. It's a lot different than if your $25 rare cards get destroyed. It's the $25 is probably 2 decks or something, depending on we don't know how exactly the pricing scheme works for print on demand, but like um it's yeah, I mean, like, that's
It'll
actually gonna be really
definitely be
cool.
cheaper than them ruining your dual land that costs $300 a
Oh my
piece.
god, yes. Yeah. Yeah, we don't wanna give them expensive Magic decks at all, for sure. So yeah, I think that's gonna be really cool. That's one thing is I haven't gotten to demo to any kids yet. It's been all, people in our sort of age range, which at this point is like 100, feels like. Um, but, uh, so far, um, like I said, everybody who I've gotten to play the game has said that they absolutely loved it. They've wanted to play more. We had actually at our local shop, um, I was telling all the employees there who I know pretty well, and I was saying, "Hey, I'm demoing Altered today," and they all like looked into it, and then they're like, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do." There were like 3 or 4 of them working that day, and they're like, "We're gonna take shifts. We're each gonna take a break and come demo with you, and then swap out." And they did that. They each person just kind of swapped in and out so they could all play the game. And then actually, like a couple people ended up not getting to a couple more people there ended up not getting to. So they're like, "Can you leave your decks with us so we can play later on?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Like, go for it." So, got to teach the entire crew at the LGS. I got to teach the LGS owner. Once again, Josh at JW Sports Cards, another one of our sponsors, who is very intrigued initially um, by just the system of ownership and purchasing cards. Already was intrigued from sort of a like an LGS perspective and seeing it as an interesting market to try and capitalize on. He tried the game and he was like, he looked at me and he was like, "Dan, why do you keep doing this to me?" "Yep, I'm gonna have to go all in on this too." Like, yeah, yeah. Sorry, it's good. The game is good.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
it's a breath of fresh air too, because we've tried a lot of games that are, from bad to this is an okay game to, excellent, but this one really like knocked us away. It's hitting the ball in all the right places.
Well, there is a reason that this is one of our podcasts now. It's like
True.
pretty clear at this point. I was curious, Jordan. You got to play with your wife a little bit. How did she like the game?
She liked it, which was surprising and not surprising. She was most intrigued already from the get go because when I told her about it, she was kind of excited, and then she saw some of the art and she's like, "Oh, I like all the art on all of these cards." So that was her main draw, and then she played it. One of the things that I love about the game too is it's easy to teach and easy to understand what's happening, but it has the classic cornerstone of an excellent game where the barrier to entry is low, but the skill ceiling is high because
Mhm.
there's a lot of nuance to all the decisions you make. So it's great for because she likes card games. She's not like me, like knee deep in the weeds. So she's able to get in and play competently at a very low entry point, and she enjoyed that factor of it. It didn't take a lot. It wasn't like when I taught her universes. It took 2 or 3 demos before she was like, I'm kind of getting what the hell's happening on
Yeah.
this game right now. But this one, it was like halfway through the demo, she was already like, all right, I know what I'm going to do in my, like, I know I have a plan. She's already like in the mode of like, I know and feel comfortable what I'm doing. Um, and
Yes,
she's
I
excited to
also
try some of the other factions as well because we only had the 2 at the time that we ran the demo because we were waiting on our free printing to refresh for color printing because I wanted to do
right.
color. I didn't
You're
want to get
using
black and white. I was like, got to do color printing.
shout out to your local library.
Yeah, local library.
Yeah, I have also experienced that with it has just felt super easy to get the game into people's heads right away. Like I feel like on your first demo session, you are already able to like start to strategize, which is not the case with a lot of TCGs are have a reasonable. I don't think anything right now is like exceptionally hard to learn, but like universes is on the top end, I think, of TCGs in
Hmm.
the current market as far as like hard ones to get into. But um there you know there is definitely a curve to how easy they are, and altered feels like Lorcana is the easiest game I think to learn right now, but altered is on the list. Actually, I just published the video top 5 easiest to learn TCGs,
Yeah,
which
I was like, oh man, how come all this? And I just chalked it up to it's technically not out yet at all in any capacity. So that was probably why you didn't include it on there.
correct. Yes, but if I did that list in 2024, I think altered would have to be included on it. So we'll see. Maybe I'll revisit it next year. Um, One thing that has been a point of contention. So let's bring up the big point of contention in altered, other than people who I think are either well, actually, I'm just going to turn this into a whole segment. Here are the things that I think have been points of contention for people in general looking at the game. Mostly, and by the way, I want to be clear, mostly things that I hear from people online who are just kind of checking it out for the first time. I read every single comment I get on YouTube. So I have read some of these in our own comment section on our videos. And I actually watch pretty pretty frequently the posts that altered makes on Facebook and Twitter, and I read comments and threads uh on all of those basically. So the main negative feedback that I hear from people, not that people who played the game, just people who are looking from the outside, is concern about the purchasing and ownership, digital ownership system. Obviously, um,
The blockchain.
not the it's not blockchain. It's
No, I know that's the misconception though. People for some reason still think it's NFT based, even though the developers have specifically said it has nothing to do with blockchain. It's not an NFT. There's nothing like that. It's going to be hosted on their servers. The way I've been telling my friends and the people that I demo to is a good way to think about it is it's more like if you play an MMO like Guild Wars or World of Warcraft. All of your digital character stuff is hosted on their server and it's just the same. Instead of your inventory and your characters and how you put your skill points being hosted on the server, it's what cards and how many you own on your collection is just being hosted on their proprietary servers. Like
and
it's not like an NFT at all.
the way that I actually describe that when I'm getting kind of deeper into the conversation with someone is actually even a little more specific than that, because when you buy these packs of cards, you own all of the physical cards inside. But what you are really doing when you scan them into the app is you are basically unlocking the license to use that card in a tournament or to print additional copies of that card. So it's I mean they describe it, it's so much faster to describe it as just digitally owning the card, but it that's actually kind of a distinction that I think helps the game click with more people a little bit more, because it's less about that whole like owning something that isn't real, and it's more about, can I use this in a tournament? Can I print additional copies of this card? And when you sell that, you're just selling those rights to someone else, but you keep the card, um, if you want to, um, or you can throw it away, or you can do whatever you want with it. But you should keep it probably. Um, and it's I guess I just find it, I don't quite follow the backlash that gets, unless it's people who are seriously thinking it's like some sort of a rug pull, some sort of a crypto scam or something like that. Um, but there's nothing about the system to me that comes off as any sort of a, like, I don't get the same red flags, I guess is what I'm saying, that I think other people get when they read it. And so it just makes me think maybe they just don't, maybe they're seeing, maybe they are seeing it differently. They're not understanding. Another point they bring up, I've directly responded to this a few times, was, well, what happens when the game dies, the servers go down, you've got nothing. And that is only true in everything except Altered. Like, the funny thing about, I've literally read that argument word for word, and this is the one instantiation of a digital quote unquote ownership or whatever where that's distinctly not the case. It's like the
Yeah, because it's like even if their servers shut down, you still bought physical cards that you can still play with just like any other card game. Like, yeah, it's weird that they'd think that, just because like every purchase you make, unless it's from a different person, is like you're buying the physical packs, you're scanning the physical cards. So if you're, even the day the game came out, if you bought a bunch of boxes and they crashed the first day, game's done, they're not making anymore, you still have that product physically and can still, nothing stops you from still playing the game. You just can't print off new cards, which, to be fair, in any other card game is just not an option at all to print off new
yeah,
cards. So
exactly. It's the same thing.
it's the same thing, but literally better, because there'll be at least some amount of time that you can just print however much you want to just have those copies. Like, it's just, I don't
Now,
know.
here's where I think it gets a little more like it's a point of view type thing, and I don't know that, like, this is like, your mileage may vary, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So from our perspective, Jordan, you and I, we're card game players, right? We like to play TCGs. We've played TCGs for infinite years. Um, there are people who engage in TCGs, but while they may play them sometimes, they're more from the collector's angle, right? And if you look at the game solely from that collector's angle, I can see where some things would feel like they're not firing on the pistons that you're looking for. Again, you have to put your head in this headspace of, I'm someone who wants to own cards because they're rare. I want to have special cards. I want to have things to collect to complete sets. I want to do that kind of stuff. So from that angle, there's no physical scarcity to any individual, like, physical piece of cardboard. There's no physical scarcity to it, because when you get it, even if you're the only owner of it, for example, in the uniques that they release, you can go print 1,000 of them, and now you no longer have a physically scarce object. Um, you can also, uh, if you are trying to collect sets of things, if you're a collector who wants to finish a complete playset of the game, well, that's not
You can't.
possible.
Yeah, I think this game, just from its design, and given it makes sense when you think about the fact that the main designers were originally board game designers. They don't care, like, this collection isn't a thing that comes into your head like normal TCGs, which I think plays to the game's strength, and in certain ways, is this is just not a game that collectors will ever care about unless they just happen to like the art and they just want for their own reasons. Because and you might think originally, oh well, the game's going to die then, because collectors are an important part of normal TCGs, because that's what gets people to rip open fresh boxes. However, they designed the game in such a way that the game players are the ones that are going to want to rip product open, because more uniques are always out there. The chase is more now in the hands of the players, because they're like, oh, but I could get a sick unique at any point. So, us who will have a bunch of product, there's still incentive for us to be excited about our prize packs, or, buying a box here and there, because now it's not chasing this, super rare one of one chrome rare or something. It's what kind of sick unique cards can I still pull that are in the pools somewhere out there in the wild?
I think there will still be some collectors who find it interesting to do certain things, like hunting the strongest unique or the coolest unique, or like hunting as many uniques of your favorite card. Let's say you really like Hua Mulan, and you're just like, I'm gonna collect unique
All
Hua
of them.
Mulans. Yeah, like I think that is going to appeal to certain people. And with the way they're doing foils, the foiler system, so every few packs you open a foiler, which is going to be of a common rare or unique rarity, and then you can apply it to cards in your collection and then print off foil versions of them.
Yeah.
Um, I think there are going to be people who are going to see, because by the way, the set size is enormous. I don't know if you've caught this. We just had this kind of for the first time, I think, mentioned in like a Twitter thread or something. Um, but they said it's about 400 cards in the set, not counting uniques, obviously.
And that
Um,
does make sense from if you think about it too, because in this game, unlike most other card games, to our knowledge, there's no color mixing, and they have 6 factions that they have
yep.
to make pools that are big enough for, so you have different things that you can do in it. So that it does make sense that there's going to be a pretty substantial pool for the first set for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And because of the way they set the game up, that means it's going to be roughly 130 commons and roughly 260 rares, because every common will have the upgraded rare version and then the faction shifted rare version.
Yeah.
Which is going to then create. That's where also there's going to be like that pool that's big enough for all the factions to really like exist too. It's actually it's a very clever way of doing the game, which I'm very excited to see how that pans out. But that means for someone who sees that and likes the game and has a collector mentality, they might go, you know what a tough collection would be and a fun collection would be? A foil of every non-unique in the game. And you can always go, and I'll get one foil unique of every card too, or something if you want to.
Yeah.
Um, that's an enormous collection. That would be impressive to see. That would be impressive to collect. And I think that would appeal to some people. And
I
when the
should
game,
rephrase.
oh, go ahead.
Continue. I
No,
was
no,
to
you
say
go
I
ahead.
should rephrase my original point. Then what I meant when I say collectors, I more meant the collectors that are in it to collect and flip cards for value.
Oh,
So those,
okay.
yeah, there's definitely still going to be collectors like that
Yes.
where they have their own personal collection goal. They have no intention of, like, they're not collecting to then offload it later at a markup price, or like I have a full set now, it's worth X amount. They're going to be collectors out there, but they're more just like their own personal goals. Like you said, like they're like, I really love Lyra. I want to find foils of all Lyra, and I want to have foil playsets of all Lyra cards that I can get my hands on, kind of deal. But
Yeah.
they aren't. Their intention isn't to buy them to flip them because they're rare. Their intention is just to buy them because they just love that thing, if you will.
I think that might be a topic for another podcast that would be kind of interesting, but I still think the people you're talking about, the consumers you're talking about who want to buy to flip rare cards, I actually think the game should appeal to them too, because again, every box could potentially have the strongest card in the game that nobody's seen before. If you get a unique that's really good,
I suppose,
like
yeah.
it's like there's hits, but the problem is you don't know what the hits are exactly, and the hits are very dependent on, like, it's that's so funny.
They're
You
meta
go to
dependent. When the
go to
meta is going to
go
be
to
everything.
go to any other game, open up the rarest serialized card. Okay, what's this worth? Even if it's serialized, what's it worth? Go on eBay. You say, okay, a number 2 sold for 5,000. A number 53 sold for 2,500. This is a number 7, so maybe it's like going to be like a 3-4K or something. Like you can make a guess, right? You open up a unique in this game. I don't know. Like, how good is it? Is like it's going to be very difficult to determine the price, and there's no comps. There's no way to look and see, like, you can look at what other uniques of that card have sold for, but that doesn't mean anything. They
Yeah,
like
they
that
could be
is
wildly different. Then you're just like in the dark. So yeah, it'll be an interesting. It'll almost feel like you're going back to the Wild West bartering system because like every card is just going to be like, what? Sure, I guess like I'll do this for 4 nickels and a paperclip.
yeah. And I think that is really hitting at an important point that people who have been checking the game out but have been hesitant on it or have expressed concern or disbelief in its ability to succeed. I think, and I don't want to like put I don't want to speak for them, right? But the vibe I get from this is that these are generally people approaching the game from a particular point of view of how TCGs work. And I just think Altered's going to be different. And I think it's hard to predict how the market is going to be for a game when it's honestly when I did another video looking back at one of the documents that was released recently, was uncovered from the founding of Magic, when the company that would become Wizards of the Coast was trying to get investors to hop on. So they produced this document, and it was like, "Here's what we're doing," and it was talking about how revolutionary their system was because here's people will buy this, and it has this breakdown of like we expect casual players to buy a starter deck and a few booster packs. And we expect people who are just going to try the game to maybe buy a single starter deck. And we expect the serious players to buy up to a booster box. Okay. And now, if you hear all that stuff and you are a serious TCG player, you're like, well, that won't even get you close to the cards you need. Like, you probably are going to buy at least a case, or you're going to buy everything in singles. Um, so what we predict about the market for something that is approaching it as I think as differently as Altered isn't necessarily how things are going to pan out if all we're doing is using what we expect from our the next best comparison we have, which I think is what they were using. Because if you think about like a serious baseball card collector, maybe a serious baseball card collector does just buy, like, I mean, today it's probably different, but
Yeah,
back then maybe it was like they did
at
just,
that time.
yeah, they're just like, I'm going to buy a box and hope I get my, I don't know baseball. I'm going to make a fool of myself. My Mickey Mantle, that's a guy, right? That's a guy from
You're asking
baseball.
the wrong man. I don't know, especially
Sure.
old baseball.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was their comp, right? And they were just like, it's going to be kind of like this, and they failed to accurately predict how badly people wanted good cards,
Yeah,
right?
it's funny too because like I don't even I think this was a rumor or maybe this was in an interview too. Like when they were asked why they made the Power Nine so bombastically good, it's because they were literally like, "Oh, we didn't actually expect people to own 4 copies of each of these.
Yeah,
Like we built them because we were expecting like maybe you'll pull one or two, and that's what your deck will consist of." They're like, it just didn't dawn on them that people would be like buying so much product where they would get full play sets of all of these cards. They weren't meant to be like used all in one deck. That was just like, yeah, well, you might have one or two in your collection of 1 or 3 of these. Like, no big deal. We can handle that. The game's robust enough. And then, yeah, the game just went off the rails, and people were buying so much that there's like, oh, yeah, these cards are broken now because everyone has 4 copies of every one of them.
yeah, and I mean that lines up. That lines up with what the expectations they laid out in that document and everything. So I think it's very difficult to sit down and take any of the current market models and apply them to Altered and make your prediction on like what values are going to be like, or how players are how people are going to respond, how consumers are going to respond to this being in the marketplace. Um, I can tell you based on what we think the psychographic profiles of people that we've showed the game to, we've demoed the game to, and that we know are TCG players, and we can say like, here's what they might like or dislike about the game. But um, I don't think you can approach it from this perspective of, well, collectors clearly aren't going to like this. Collectors like me aren't going to like this, so it's going to flop or something. Because I think it's just too different. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to create new niches of consumers, and it's going to find niches of consumers who really enjoy this.
Yeah. I'm very excited just for the game in general too, because it's like just watching it evolve and see how things go and pan out is going to be almost as exciting as playing the game. And the implications of what this game is going to do to the space if it does succeed is going to be huge. Like it's as like we were talking about when we left Gen Con. It's like these guys are thinking in like 2023, and all the other TCG creators are thinking in 20, in the aughts still.
Yeah, yeah.
Like as far as
It's
like like non-gameplay related stuff, like these guys are truly thinking future forward, and it's either gonna pay like mega dividends, or it's still just gonna be the thing that gets people's eyes on it.
and I there's one more thing that I think that people have pointed out as a what they believe is an immediate flaw in the game. And I'm going to bring it up right now, and I want you to tell me what your experience has been with this, Jordan. So, in order to scan these cards in the app, you need to scan their QR code,
Yeah,
which is located on the front and the bottom corner of the card. Jordan, what do you think about the QR codes?
I think that they're perfectly fine.
I also think that they're perfectly fine. Um, so
But other people
they don't.
do
They
not.
don't. They do not think that. And you know what? To be fair, like all's fair and matters of taste, right? It's like whatever. Like if you're like, you know what, I hate that QR code. More power to you. I'm not going to be like, you better like it. Like, and I won't say that I like the QR code. Like, I'm not like someone who's like, my bed sheets are QR codes because I really like looking at them or anything. But here's what I can say about the QR code. Every single person I've demoed this game to, I demoed it to people. And then after I ran a whole bunch of demos, then I just was asking like open-ended question, like, what did you think about the QR codes? And the general response was, "Oh yeah, I forgot there were QR codes on the cards." Like legit, like I'm not making this up. That was a phrase that I heard variants of. Um, and I I think what this has to do with is how human brains work. Brains are weird. We don't understand brains. Brains are ridiculous meat
Our brains can
bags.
filter stuff out, and you don't even realize it.
Brains can filter stuff out, and brains can fixate on things in interesting ways. So I think this comes up when people are looking
Wearing
at altered.
glasses, that really hits home with me on both the fixation and the filtering out.
Yeah, yep. And when you're looking at an altered card right away and you don't know how the game works, I think one thing that happens is your brain parses as much as it can. It kind of skims through. It's like, okay, a name, art, some stuff I don't understand, a QR code. It's really easy because you know what a QR code is. You know it's there, and you boom, 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 you just your brain just like looks at it right away. And it's really easy when you haven't played the game to like see that as a something that just sticks out on the card. Now, as soon as you start playing the game, you get into the game, learn the game, and you actually get into the decision space, it's not even there. Because instead now your brain is fixating on the rest of the card. It
Hmm.
doesn't even maybe your mileage will vary on this, but that's been my experience. That's been the experience of every single person I've demoed with, and that's been your experience too, I believe, Jordan. Right?
Yeah, and like part of the reason it filters out so easy too and very quickly is because to the normal person, all the QR codes look like the same symbol. So it's the only feature of the card that never changes on anything. So it's you notice it less and less very quickly, because as you look from card to card, you're noticing all the differences, and that's the only thing that's the same. So your brain almost just forgets it's there. Like two turns in, you just forget that there's QR codes on the card. Now, I get why some people, like a collector, would be like, the QR code looks ugly in the corner. I wish it wasn't there. But again, going back to my personal belief, where they didn't, it's obvious they didn't design it as like a collector game. There'll probably be people who do collect the game, but I don't think it's like a collector's game to begin with, which is why it doesn't really bother me all that much. Like, and I'm also a mechanics guy. Like I'm there to play the game, not to collect it. So like the fact that my brain forgets it's there and focuses on the important bits, totally fine with it.
I think there's something also. This is the first time I've kind of put this idea out there, but I think there's something to having it be obvious on the card too that I think is important to how the game works. Um, It's, when you already understand everything about the game and you know about scanning the cards in and everything, it could be anywhere or anything, and you would find it and you would know to do it because again, your brain already knows that that's the thing to do. But if you just pick up this game for the first time,
And you
you,
have no knowledge of the digital collection or anything. You're just like, oh, what's this card game at my shop? Yeah, I see what you're saying. Because then you'll open the pack, they'll see it. Even if you're not like, QR codes are pretty unanimously known across most
yep,
things. If you have a smartphone, they're immediately just going to be like, what's this? And then they'll scan it. And then the card does the job of teaching people like what it's all about immediately. Because then they'll be like, I got to know. They'll scan it, adds to their collections like, hey, make an account. This is what this is about. Like, and it's, yeah. So I get what you're about to go on that one. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Intuitive in its
yes.
design, because it'll just immediately capture the attention of people who don't know what it's about.
The other option would be they hide it. They hide it within the artwork in some way. I heard someone recently commenting like, why don't they do that? Or a lot of people say put it on the back of the card, which I don't like at all for multiple reasons. But if you do anything like that and you want to get this information to the people's hands as soon as possible, the only other option is to like include an insert in your packs with like that like explains what they're supposed to do in like every pack or something. And let me tell you, Magic has had inserts in its packs that have words on them for uh maybe decades, over a decade now. Not decades quite, but over a decade.
No one looks at them.
And let me tell you the number of those I've read. I can count it on one hand. I think I'm done counting actually. This insert cards like that, like in the 90s, maybe you're an old school gamer and you're thinking like, yeah, that used to work. Like the rules for Jedi test training when Star Wars CCG were in the Dagobah packs or whatever. Okay, but it doesn't work now because that's not how that it's noise. It's noise to people.
It's
Nobody
just one more piece of garbage in the pack that everyone just throws away.
There are people who read them. I want to be clear. I said nobody, but I think it's
It's
largely
the
ignored.
small minority.
Yes. And so if you have a system where it's very clear to a first time buyer that they should scan this and figure it out because they're going to want to know why it's there. Um, and when you're playing, it has no bearing whatsoever on your play. You don't even notice it anymore. And it makes it simple to crack open the pack, splay everything out, and just scan it in. You don't have to flip things around or whatever. Like it's another thing. If you're like a draft, let's say you're drafting Altered or whatever, if their QR codes are on the back of your pack and not the front, it'd be easier for someone to be like, yeah, got your card or whatever. Like,
Get wrecked,
right?
nerd.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a whole other thing. A lot of people have brought that issue up, but it's like, well, yeah, it's also easy for me to reach over and grab your pack and run. Like it's not,
Yeah,
it's
people aren't just gonna steal. Like, and if they are, they're not gonna be at the store very long.
a lot of the same issues people bring up with Altered. Like, what if someone scans your cards? What if someone, what if you lose your deck or actually it's better, that's better in Altered if you lose deck or whatever. But like, there's a number of issues that people bring up that are exactly the same with any other card game. It's not different at all. Like what if you lose your app access? Okay. What if you lose your collection? Like, I don't know. Like it's
Yeah,
you can draw
it's
the
just
same
because
parallels.
yeah, it's just because the same end result happens. It's just the method that it happens is different, and it's difference, is what people are concerned about. But yeah, if they sat down and thought about it, they'd literally, like you said, they'd be like, yeah, I guess that could just happen in anything else. It's just instead of them scanning your QR code, they're just stealing the deck. I don't know.
Yep. But there's gonna be pushback. There's any new thing,
Mhm.
whether it's good or bad. And again, I want to be clear. Like we are optimistic and excited about Altered, but I'm also not like even though we're making this podcast, I'm not betting my life savings on this or anything. I'm excited. I'm curious to see how it pans out, but that's, it's new technology, and whether or not it gets adopted and if it becomes successful is not in my hands and might not even be as in the hands of Equinox as they would like it to be. So, but so far, like our experiences just with the print and play have been very positive.
Very much so.
Have absolutely
very
loved
excited.
playing this. Yes. Playing the game itself has been fun. Showing people the game has been fun. When I
Seeing
get to
their
tell,
reactions has been
yes,
great too. The reception has been just generally positive across the board. Like I said, even like you said too, people that literally sit down ready to critique the game end up leaving the table like, looks like I'm in another card game, ladies and
Yep.
gentlemen.
Yep. And when I get to explain some of these things that I think people have knee-jerk negative reactions to, when I get to like sit down and actually talk with people, I haven't gotten that reaction at all. Turns out it's just people online who are posting anonymously and stuff. So go figure. The internet's the internet.
But I think that's all we have for you guys today. And as the day comes to a close, those are our fleeting thoughts. We hope you enjoyed them, and we'd like to thank you very much for conversating and listening to us talk about the Altered TCG. And we look forward to seeing you in about 2 weeks. Have a great day.
See ya.